From the Fidelity Bank Foundation Studio, PBS Kansas presents One-on-One with Victor Hogstrom.
This is where the stars of Kansas shed light on life and the human condition. My guest this week is Dr. Reggie Jarrell. He's a pastor, a lawyer, and an instructor of communication at Southwestern College in Winfield. Jarrell has written a book titled 31 Days, Nights, Memoir of Living Black in America. It's a collection of essays about the experiences that have molded him as a black man growing up and raising his own family in Kansas. Coming up, we'll hear about some of those experiences, how they shape his teaching and relationships. We'll also talk about race relations in Kansas and his hopes and concerns for the future. This should be an enlightening and interesting half hour as I go one-on-one with Dr. Reggie Jarrell right now. Hello, and thank you for joining us. I'm Victor Hogstrom. It pleases me to welcome pastor, lawyer, and instructor of communications, Reggie Jarrell, to the program. Welcome.
Thank you very much for having me. Thank you.
It's a pleasure to have you. You have such interesting background, and that's what we want to talk about too. But first of all, you studied law, the ministry, communications. You are a lawyer and a pastor. Why did you become a lawyer and a pastor?
I've always felt called to the ministry when I was a child, 9, 10, 11. And for many years I ran from the ministry until I was in my early to mid-30s, when I finally answered my call to the ministry. At that time, I was practicing law. Mm-hmm. Law had been just an idea planted in my mind when I was an undergrad at American University. And it was just one of those types of things that it wasn't anything planned, meaning from the standpoint I was practicing law and doing okay, Prairie State Legal Services in Rock Island, Illinois. And I finally decided, well, after wrestling many years with God and the call, to answer the call of the ministry. So it's just one of those things that, no, it wasn't planned, it just happened that way.
But you didn't study law in the beginning, you studied communications.
Yes.
Have a bachelor's and a master's degree in communications.
Yes.
From, is it American University?
Yes, sir.
In Washington, D.C. So why then communications?
When I started in communications back in junior high school at Mayberry Junior High, and then West High, continued with journalism, communication, and I knew that I wanted to study and work in communications, whether that was television, print journalism, whatever the case may be. Okay. So I've always, for many years, been involved in some aspect of communications. And then it just kind of evolved from there, meaning from the standpoint, is it television I want to do, print journalism I want to do, broadcasting, film production, those types of things. I just knew that I was at home in communications. And then, as I said, when I was studying communications at AU, I just got the idea, maybe one of these days I'll pursue law.
And you did?
Yes, yes.
So then tell me this. You know, with the reputation of lawyers generally, mm-hmm. How do you reconcile being a pastor and a lawyer?
To be honest, sometimes it was challenging. And that it was challenging, and that was one of the reasons why I stopped practicing law from time to time, because I felt the inner conflict, meaning from the standpoint, I'm representing clients doing a particular type of law, but I'm conflicted, the moral and ethical challenge. And it was not one of those types of things that my employers saw from the standpoint, well, Reggie, for some reason you were reluctant to do this type of case. Well, no, it wasn't anything like that. It was just one of those internal conflicts that I just realized, well, my job is to serve as an advocate for my client. And I did my job, but at the same time, sometimes there was that conflict, that challenge, meaning from standpoint, well, yeah, this is the law. I have a duty to represent my client zealously, and I did that. Mm-hmm. But sometimes with the facts of particular cases in the law, and then my ethical obligation, thinking in terms of my religious thought and beliefs, and I just realized that from time to time, there's a conflict here, and I can no longer do this. Mm-hmm. So from time to time, I did step away from the law for that reason, the internal conflict.
Right, right. You grew up in Wichita, and you went to various places for education, law in Iowa.
Yes, sir.
Further education too in Washington, D.C., American University.
Yes, sir.
And where else did you get? You have 5 degrees.
5 degrees,
Tell
yes.
us about those degrees.
My bachelor's degree, American University, Washington, D.C., Iowa State University, Master's Communication, Master of Divinity, American Baptist Seminary of the West, which is now Berkeley School of Theology.
That's in California.
In California.
Right.
Mm-hmm. My doctorate in ministry is from Berkeley School of Theology, and then my law degree is from University of Iowa.
Okay, so you returned to Kansas.
Yes, sir.
But you've written a book.
Yes, sir.
And I had the book in my hand. It's called 31 Days, Nights. Here it is. I'll give this book to you, but first, before I ask you to read your favorite passage, summarize it for our audience. What is it about?
This book is highlights, moments, challenges of my life, written for my grandchildren, thinking in terms of the messages, things that I would want them to know. Now, my youngest grandchild is 1, my oldest is 6. Things that I want them to know when they entered young adulthood or adult. So I realized, okay, the idea for the book came from my wife. Mm. And it was in 2016. We were awaiting the birth of our first 2 grandchildren. And my wife indicated to me, Reggie, you ought to write something for your grandchildren so they know something about you. Mm. And I thought that was a great idea because there were many stories that I had never told my wife or my family of things that had happened to me. So of course, they couldn't pass on those messages or those lessons. So when she said that the light bulb just went off, and I said, sure. And I've written part of my life spent in journalism. So I worked as a freelance columnist for many years, several years ago. So writing essay style or column styles was nothing new to me. And I decided, well, I'll write a series of essays for my grandchildren to read to read once they reach a certain age. So in short, it's a book about, again, highlights and lowlights moments of my life.
So let's state first some of the highlights, or the 1 or 2 highlights, the high points of your life in this book.
One would be at Mayberry Junior High, and this is the late 60s, early 70s, 70, 71. We were part of that first class that integrated, meaning busing in Wichita. So 69, 70, 71, whenever that was. And we were bused to Mayberry Junior High. And my 8th grade year, I decided to run for student council president.
Ah, okay.
And I won.
And you won.
And I won. And that story is mentioned in this book here. But they had the speakers come out on stage. If I remember correctly, it was 6 of us. We had both presidential and vice presidential candidate. And I wrote a speech. And my first words out of my mouth for my speech, power to the people. Mm-hmm. And I remember the applause and the ovation from the students from just that. Because again, it was just unusual to hear something like that. But that's how I started my speech. And again, I won that election. And it's a highlight because again, at that point in my time, I guess I was trying to find myself, where I fit in, what I wanted to do with my life, how I can make a contribution, how I could make a difference, my purpose. And I realized, oh, okay, well, we can dream, meaning you set goals and you work toward those goals. And I set the goal and I achieved. And now, looking back on it, well, it's just student council president, but I believe I was the first African-American student council president at that school. I believe that. But the key thing was, it was a moment of transformation for me, indicating to me that you can set a goal, you can reach people, and you can reach that goal with the help of other people.
And you can be anything you want to be.
Yes,
once
sir.
you put your mind to it.
Yes.
So what was one low point growing up?
I guess one low point growing up, in my book, sometimes I discuss some of the challenges, bullying. And I mentioned that in my book, one time getting on the school bus at Mayberry Junior High. I think this was in 7th grade. And coming on the bus and being called names and derogatory names and from other students on the bus. In particular, there was 3 students in mine. And I remember sitting, hearing those names, or that name being called. And I was sitting next to a friend of mine. And he said, "Reggie, you hear what they're saying about you?" And I said, "No, they're not talking about me. No, not me. No, not at all." But they were talking about me. They were calling me those names.
Right. So when you became student council president, they were surprised, and did you do anything about it?
About
the name calling, and it's in the book.
At that time, no, I reached out to those. Now, the name calling situation occurred before the student council president situation.
Right.
So I did reach out to 2 of the 3 individuals, and I asked, why? Why were they calling me these names? And one person gave me her ideas as to what was going on, as to why she was calling me, or they were calling me these names. And I thought about it, and I thought there was something wrong with me. And then I realized, I read a magazine article by Jim Brown, the football player. And in that, I think it was either Look or Look magazine. But my point is, in that magazine article, he expressed the attitude that I'm going to do what I want to do, what's best for me, and not be concerned with what other people think. And that made such a drastic impression on me, as far as, yes, I can be me. I don't have to make excuses. I don't have to make up things as far as trying to please someone else. So that changed my attitude, my perception, thinking in terms of reading that story about Jim Brown, and then thinking in terms of what one of the bullies had told me about, you need to change. No, I don't have to change. I can be me. And then when I won the presidency of being student council president, I realized, yes, I can be me, and I don't have to make excuses. I don't have to change for anyone else.
So, Dr. Jarrell, what was your greatest challenge growing up?
Greatest challenge growing up. I must say, trying to, again, find my purpose and realize, where do I fit in? Meaning just that, what I always wanted to achieve. I wanted to do something with my life. But again, as far as role models, African-American role models, they're very few and far between. And I came from a blue-collar family. There weren't very many, if any, professionals, no doctors, no lawyers, nothing like that.
No role models.
Just blue-collar folk, farm families, things of that nature. And I say all that to say is, well, I want to do something with my life. I want to achieve, But again, how do I do that? Where do I fit in? Where do I find my voice? And I've always loved school. I've always loved education and that aspect of it. So it's just one of those types of things that, okay, maybe this is the area that I should consider. But still, just trying to find my voice, trying to be seen, trying to fit in,
Right.
whatever that may mean.
And you do love education because you've got yourself 5 degrees. Now, please read your favorite passage of this in this book that you've written, 31 Days, Night.
All right, I certainly will be happy to. Day 6, Mrs. Reed, Mayberry Hall Monitor, 1969 to 72, Wichita, Kansas. Willowy, slight build, short stature with snow white hair and wire-rimmed glasses. Hands with a grip strong as iron. This tough as nails educator sternly patrolled the Mayberry Junior High halls. Didn't know Mrs. Reed when I first saw her in action. Because of her reputation, I thought she was the meanest person in the school. I wasn't alone either. Many black students had her pegged, bones of callous prejudice with cloudy eyes of bias and favoritism. Little did we know. Many teens and junior high youngsters were full of assumptions and attitudes and short of common sense and experience. And don't even mention the word wisdom. When I finally enrolled in Mrs. Reed's algebra class as a 9th grade student, I found a teacher who was efficient, organized, and most importantly, patient, understanding, considerate, even kind. Now don't get me wrong. She kept firm control of her class and students. There was discipline and structure. The bottom line, Mrs. Reed cared, I would discover later. During the spring, there was always a 9th grade dance, and Mrs. Reed was there. My mother was one of the parents who chaperoned the event. Mother not only met Mrs. Reed, but shockingly engaged in conversation with her. Very enlightening conversation. In class, I noticed that Mrs. Reed seemed to have a special relationship with a sweet-natured Native American girl. Not that she treated her as a favorite, but clearly there was something about the girl that attracted her attention. I found out why. Mother learned, to my amazement, that Mrs. Reed, the hateful, bigoted, evil hall monitor, was married to a Native American. I never would have guessed it. So much for all those accusations of her being prejudiced and biased against blacks and other oppressed people. Mrs. Reed had lived with discrimination and oppression up close and very personal. Well, what do you know? My perception of Mrs. Reed was never the same. Finished Mayberry and on to high school, then to college, then to grad school, then the real world, jobs, the rat race, etc. I was working as a news reporter in Des Moines, Iowa in the early 1980s when Mother got a phone call from, yep, that's right, Mrs. Reed. All those years, Mrs. Reed just wanted to check and see how I was doing. And an unlikely, unexpected friendship began. She offered her help if I needed any with math and grad school courses. I didn't, but we stayed in contact. When I returned to town, I made a point to visit Mrs. Reed, and I had the opportunity to meet her husband. Wonderful woman, wonderful family. I was truly blessed.
So Mrs. Reed ended up being a very nice lady in the end.
Yes.
All right.
Yes.
Very interesting.
Yes.
How did your family end up in Wichita?
My family were hailed from rural Oklahoma. Make a long story short, it was the boom of the aircraft industry, Boeing, Beach, and other industries. Right. They came here to work. Wanted to leave the farm, left the farm to come here to work. Better job opportunities.
So looking at yesteryears, comparing those years to today now, what's your assessment of race relations within the greater Wichita community?
Things have, in some ways, gotten a lot better. As you know, we've had African-American mayor and other city officials and city positions. So in some instances, there's been improvement, but in some instances, things have not improved as greatly as it should be.
What would you like to see improved?
I would like to see more conversations about prejudice and discrimination and those types of things, because again, if we don't talk about those issues, then of course, nothing's going to change. And I would like to see a dialogue, a conversation about issues dealing with oppressed people, again, not only African Americans, but other oppressed people in this community, so that, again, people realize that there are all kinds of voices here that need to be heard, and people can make a contribution to our community with various gifts and talents and experiences. We're all in this together. We're all part of the community.
Diversity.
Yes, yes.
Okay. So we play a little game here on this program, and it's time to do that with you, okay?
Okay.
A game of short answers in this case.
Yes, sir.
Tell me your favorite when I ask you your favorite food.
Pizza.
Pizza. Why?
I just love pizza, sausage pizza.
Your favorite holiday.
Holiday must be Christmas.
Your favorite quote.
Favorite quote? I would have to say, I can do all things through Christ or Him who strengthens me. Philippians.
Your favorite cause.
Favorite cause? I would have to say, well, civil rights issues, civil rights.
Why is that?
Why? Because, again, so many people in our country have been oppressed or disenfranchised, whatever, and voices have not been heard. And we deserve to hear all voices from all people. And every individual has something to contribute. Every individual has multiple stories to tell. We're all on this journey called life together. We all will need help from somebody at some point, someplace. That help may come from someone who does not look like you.
Right.
So again, we must learn to appreciate and value and listen and also help each other on this journey called life. Because life is tough, it really is.
Your favorite status symbol.
Favorite status symbol? Oh, well, I don't really have one.
Okay. What's your favorite way to relax?
Film, movies, watching movies. Then second would be playing my guitar. I don't play in public, but just picking at the guitar. So music or, again, watching films.
Now, you are currently an instructor of communication at Southwestern University in Winfield.
Yes, sir.
How did you, or what do you teach, I should say, and why did you switch to teaching from law and preaching?
I teach at Southwestern generally general ed courses, oral communication. Back in the day, the courses were called Principles of Speech. So primarily oral communication, but I do teach some upper level division courses like intercultural communication, communications theory, interpersonal communication, cross-cultural communication, those types of things as well. Why I decided to teach, I was working in broadcasting, WHO-TV, Channel 13 many years ago, and I realized I needed to change my career. And the reason why, I was doing hard news along with light news, feature stories, but it was the hard news stories that started to get to me, meaning covering people who killed, the tough things. And I needed a break. And I realized that I have experience and messages for children or young people that need to be told, meaning from standpoint, I decided that I would teach, because I wanted to tell students what life in journalism was really like behind the scenes. Yes, in journalism school, I learned to dot the I's, cross the T's, who, what, when, where, those types of things. But again, out on a story and someone's been killed, and how do you approach someone in the midst of grieving, asking them to tell the story? Right. How do you, those types of things. Well, they didn't teach those things in journalism school, and I felt those messages need to be taught, or those lessons need to be told to students in school, in college.
So you talked about young people. Tell me this, what about young people today that encourages you as an instructor, as a father and a grandfather?
The potential. I see so much potential, so much talent, so many gifted students from all walks of life. And I encourage my students or young people or anyone actually, you can do anything you put your mind to. And just seeing that potential and that willingness to try and to hang in there. So that's what I find encouraging, and that's what I find my message to students or young people. You can do anything you want to do. Don't let anyone tell you you can't. And I often tell students, don't let anyone rain on your parade. Don't let anyone tell you your dreams cannot come true, because dreams do come true.
So what discourages you about young people today?
Sometimes lack of patience, meaning from the standpoint, it's not a sprint, it's a marathon. And it's a matter of hanging in there and keep trying and knocking on doors. Even if those doors are nailed shut, even if those windows are closed, there's more than one way to get into a career or a job or to do what you want to do. To hang in there, to figure it out. Yes, we get knocked down in life. We all get knocked down in life, but to get back up and to keep trying. So I would have to say, sometimes I find young people are a bit impatient. They think in terms, this has to happen now. No, that's not the way life works. Life is long and challenging, and you got to be in it for the long haul, the ups and the downs.
Author, professor, or instructor, pastor and lawyer, Reggie Jarrell. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much for having me, sir.
It's been a pleasure.
Thank you.
I've enjoyed it.
Thank you.
And thank you for watching this edition of One-on-One. One-on-one@kpts.org is our email address if you have a question or comment. I'm Victor Hogstrom. Be safe, and I'll see you again soon.